Thank you, Verena. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's really, I mean, I honestly just am so in awe of listening to the last two talks. And I hope that this sort of, a lot of the messages here are going to be repeated. I hope that it acts as sort of an invitation for us to go into the Q&A and reflect on this together. As Verena, you were saying, I am the engagement lead at Invest in Open Infrastructure. My name is Emmy. Just a short introduction, if you would allow me, of what Invest in Open Infrastructure, or IOI, does. We work to increase the investment in and adoption of open infrastructure to further equitable access and participation to research. We believe that for open knowledge to flourish, our system needs to be similarly designed. And so a large part of our work seeks to advance a vision where open infrastructure is the default in research and scholarship. We do this via sort of three main approaches. So first of all, we use a research-driven approach to produce guidance and strategies designed to increase the adoption of an investment in open infrastructure. We also provide resources and analysis to help funders, budget holders to assess, evaluate, and make investment decisions. And last but not least, understanding that it's important to turn that research into action, we pilot solutions and coordinate stakeholders to really increase the sustainability of the sector and to further a shared agenda to make open infrastructure the default in research. The organizers asked me to talk about funding for open infrastructure in the Global South and the associated challenges. I will admit upfront that we at Invest in Open Infrastructure are very much still at the beginning of understanding this topic ourselves. We've been really, really privileged to have had some opportunities to have really deep conversations with some experts from, the Global South or the non-weird countries on this topic. But overall, knowing that you all and speakers before me have come from, all around the world and have lived experiences and valuable perspective on the subject, I'd like to take the opportunity of this short talk to invite you all to reflect with us and help advance this work together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a project that we've been working on over the last year or so called the Catalog of Open Infrastructure Services, or COIS. I'm going to do a little demo, and the hope there is that I share with you a sense of how we are approaching this work at IOI and what we're considering when we're talking about open infrastructure. And then hopefully this leads into further reflections about what it means to think about investing in and supporting global open infrastructure in research and scholarship. So a little overview of what the Catalog of Open Infrastructure Services is and why we decided to do this work. It's really through many of our conversations at the beginning of IOI where we understand that there is an information asymmetry, that there is a lot of information out there, a lot of technologies and systems out there, and it takes time and resources to be able to understand what to choose to use or support or invest in. So what we are really hoping to achieve with COIS is to foster a greater understanding of these different services out there and to cultivate a deeper awareness of how the services are provided. In this process, we are also prototyping and designing a way of standardizing key pieces of information about these infrastructure services in order for them to meet the needs of the various stakeholders like funders, infrastructure service providers, and users. I would note here that we really, really are very inspired in this work by a lot of others who have worked in this space for a long time. Part of the process of really building on the work before us is really central to this process of designing COIS, understanding and defining what open infrastructure is. So what does it mean, open, right? And just to show you a couple of, what people have said, what people have done before, I think we come to an understanding that, open infrastructure is really something that is trusted and relied on by the broad community. there is some elements around sort of ownership and governance, right? That it should be owned and governed by the academy. This wonderful article by Angela Okuna and her co-authors had even sort of said, open infrastructure should deliberately allow for multiple forms of participation amongst a diverse set of actors, and purposefully acknowledges and seeks to redress power relations within a given context. And the UNESCO recommendations on open science, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, has specifically specified that the need for infrastructure to support open science is serve the needs of different communities. So what does this all mean, and how do we tell if a piece of infrastructure is kind of, if for the want of a better phrase, meeting this criteria? So that's kind of where COIS comes in, or we designed it for it to come in. Sorry, it skipped a little bit too fast, but there is a link here if you want to follow along on this little demo. It is a prototype. So at the moment, if you go to that link, you'll see this page, which is the home page for the catalog. It only has 10 services at this point because it's a prototype, but we do definitely intend to put more. So if you click into one of these links over here, you will see a little profile of the service. So for example, if I click Jupyter Notebook, then this is the page that you will end up, which shows the profile of how we're looking at Jupyter and really thinking about how open or what are the community engagement and governance aspects that they are practicing or have committed to, right? So just to say, all of this information, mostly, actually not all of it, but most of it has been derived from the website of the service. But you can see that we've been looking at, whether or not they have open data statements or user documentation that is accessible by the public. Any commitment to equity and inclusion. When it comes to thinking about open infrastructure and the role in serving community, is there organizational commitment to involving the community in the development of the infrastructure? Is there community governance? Are there contribution guidelines? So these are some of the things that we are considering in terms of understanding, what open infrastructure is and how, and surfacing a lot of this information using COIS so that decision makers can use this information to help them decide what to use, what to adopt, what to support. So that was a quick tour, running out of time, but just to say that in doing this work, after we had the prototype, we really wanted to understand what the value of COIS is for institutional budget holders, decision makers, and funders. So we went ahead and we did a series of interviews with potential users, and knowing that we wanted to serve a global community with COIS and all the work that we do, we try to make sure that there is global representation in terms of our interviewees. We learned a lot in doing these interviews, and I want to highlight in particular what we've learned from some of the interviewees in the Global South. They face challenges, as all our interviewers have flagged, but particularly difficulty in making these decisions in their context because of some capacity constraints that they face in gathering all this information, but also in really understanding what's needed. They feel the need to really factor into local factors into the decision-making process, because what they've seen is if they do not factor it in, then they end up deploying software that is difficult to use by their community because their communities don't work that way. So I'm going to skip through quite a bit and leave that with you, actually, just to say that I think the speakers before me have already talked about this, is that infrastructure is extremely contextual, right? It depends on, if you're from a weird country, things like internet access, power access are things that we don't think about, but are infrastructure. But these are things that needs to be invested in when you come from a non-weird society, right? So the needs are highly contextual. And so what I would love to invite all of us to think about is, how do we build a global conversation around investing in and designing solutions that really enable us to invest in open infrastructure in a way that is equitable for everyone who is participating, but also can truly further global equitable access and participation to research. Thank you very much. And I encourage you all to get in touch with me and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much, Emmy. This was a great talk and really interesting perspectives from covered